Graham. Pressure is mounting on US President Donald Trump as Democrats, Republicans and business leaders keep up the calls for his immediate removal from office. They say he incited the violent mob that overran Congress, leaving now 4 protesters dead. A Capitol Hill police officer has also now died of injuries sustained during the riot. 2 cabinet members have stepped down, and there's been a string of resignations across Washington as people rush to distance themselves from what the FBI has labelled an act of domestic terrorism. After urging people to head to the US Capitol on Wednesday, Trump now says they'll face justice and has vowed to ensure an orderly transition of power later this month. Hermione G reports.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol.
With his Twitter suspension lifted, Donald Trump posted a video in which he condemned the violence caused by a mob of his own supporters on Wednesday. Trump said he acted quickly to quell the unrest, despite other reports suggesting otherwise.
America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation.
The statement is the closest that Trump has come to conceding November's presidential election. His video message didn't refer to his previously discredited remarks about widespread fraud, which galvanized the mob. They came to Washington hoping Congress would throw out the election results, and many still there remain unrepentant.
I saw was a patriotic movement that came to Washington, D.C. It might have been hijacked by a few people who were not peaceful. I can't speak to that. We weren't a part of that.
4 protesters and 1 police officer died as a result of the violence. More than 90 people have been arrested so far, and questions remain over the policing operation that allowed the seat of US government to be so easily overcome.
Let's cross straight over to Washington, D.C. We can speak to our reporter, Colin Campbell. And Colin, we're hearing today the death of a police officer, now bringing this total death toll to 5.
Good morning, Oliver. That's right. His name is Brian Sicknick, and he joined the police force back in 2008, and he died after a skirmish with some of the rioters on Capitol Hill. He returned to his department, and then he collapsed after that confrontation. He went over to the hospital. They carried him over to the hospital, and he later died last night at around 9:30 p.m. And police say they will be looking into his death as a homicide, reining in some of the other federal investigators who will also be looking at the case, what caused his death, and who may be responsible for it.
There's been widespread pressure now being put on the police and the security apparatus in Congress itself. We've seen the head of the Capitol Police resigning as well.
That's right. He is resigning. And that's because of the way that it seemed like the Capitol Hill police were overwhelmed and definitely unprepared for the riotous mobs that marauded through Capitol Hill. Now, there's some video going around where there seems to be or appears to be Capitol Hill police allowing rioters to go past a barricade, allowing them almost free access to Capitol Hill. There are other stories that there may have been some members of law enforcement in the crowds themselves, and those members would flash their badges to the officers on duty to allow them to continue with the protesting, demonstrations, looting, rioting, and what some lawmakers are calling domestic terrorism. All of this as calls for the president to resign, to be impeached, grow louder.
Colin Campbell joining us there from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. I'm joined now from Brussels by Ian Lesser, the Vice President of the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Thanks very much for speaking with us here. All of the goings-on that we've seen on Wednesday, how big a geopolitical win is that for the people who aren't too friendly and the countries who aren't too friendly with America? I'm thinking here the likes of Iran, China, Russia.
Well, obviously, it gives a boost to the Chinese, to the Russians, Iranians, others who will be very quick to criticize the United States as not being the bastion of democracy and stability that it purports to be. I think that's obviously an embarrassment for the United States. It's also an embarrassment with allies, of course, who do wish us well. I think you can also exaggerate this. It's not surprising that in Moscow or in Beijing they would take this line, but the truth is that President Biden, incoming President Biden, is going to get a very good reception. He might even get a better reception now, because there'll be a great deal of sympathy for him.
Talking of allies there, I was at a G7 conference that was held here in France, and I remember the nations distinctly just hoping that they'd be able to get through the conference without Donald Trump making too much of a hoo-ha. 12 days now until Joe Biden comes in. Will he be able to fix those rifts that have emerged between the allies and the US?
Well, fix is a tough word. I mean, obviously there are some issues. Trade is probably the principal one, but also some regulatory issues around data protection and other things that are going to be very difficult, are going to require a lot of work. But there will be goodwill to do that between the United States and Europe. In some other areas, like climate and Iran, it will be much easier. And I think with the Democrats now controlling the Senate, it will be easier still for Joe Biden to do as he says he will do, to move much closer to the European position on many of these things. I think you'll see rapid movement on the U.S. coming back into the Paris Climate Accords, for example. So I think there's tremendous scope for improvement, and I'm sure this is going to be a priority for the Biden administration.
Ian Lesser there joining us from the German Marshall Fund. Thank you very much.